Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much once again for bringing us here. We ask that you would please bless the efforts that we have made, dear Lord. We pray that even though our bellies may be full, our intestines may be processing this food right now, maybe even going to the small sinusoids we'll be talking about in just a moment. But we ask, dear Lord, that you would give us the ability to concentrate and to learn that which you have set before us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So, there are a few basic principles that I want you to get out of this diagram here in dealing with the function of the liver cells. Liver cells are very different than other cells. I did tell you they can regenerate very quickly, but in the way that their layout in terms of their blood supply and the lymphatic portion of the cell, it's very different than any other cell. And this is the reason why. Most cells are clumped together in groups of tissue. Liver cells are in a liver tissue. It's a mass of tissue. It makes it the liver organ. But the actual cells involved here they're called hepatocytes. Hepatocytes. Hepato refers to liver, and cytes refers to cell. That's the medical terminology for the liver cell. So these liver cells are here, and they are all sorts of different shapes and sizes for the purpose of conforming themselves to these little blood routes here, these veins that are going through. Why? Because when the blood passes through here, through these sinusoids, which are little venules or veins, it needs to come in contact with the liver cell. The liver cell processes these particles that are floating along here, which came from where? The intestines in particular. So we have this food over here, and this doesn't come through the bloodstream like this. This is just for the sake of example. We have an apple here. What other red fruit? Strawberry? Cherry? Cherries? Raspberries? Tomatoes? I think they all kind of look like cherries to me, but different shapes and sizes. Watermelon, there we go. But these food particles are passing through here, right? And you want to be able to store many of these as what? They're going to be kind of sugary, right? Fructose and other starches. What does the liver do to these? What starch do your cells need, particularly like the brain cells? Glucose. So it converts these into glucose, right? So you need this process going on. You need these to come in contact with these cells here.
So the liver converts that into glucose?
Yes, it does. Among many other things it does. But there are also areas here. These are known as canaliculi. And these little kind of like lymphatic or drainage vessels actually come in contact with each one of the liver cells. So each one of the liver cells comes in contact with a blood supply, a direct blood supply, and a direct drainage system. So each cell pretty much has water and plumbing, so to speak. Right? Has a way to get these directly piped in, these nutrients in the blood directly piped in to its surface, and also a way to send things out without putting them back into the blood supply. So this is why it can process waste. Because if it just processed waste, think about the kidneys. What do? Do they process waste and then shoot it back out into the blood? They process it, and then it drains down into your ureters, into your bladder, and then out of the body, right? So your body wants to get rid of waste, right? Not hold on to it. Isn't that a blessing? Amen. So what the liver does, these liver cells actually break down a number of things. They actually break down toxins. They break down all sorts of chemicals. And when they have reached a toxic level, they're trying to get rid of this chemical. They actually put it through this canaliculi, which, think of it as a canal. What's a canal? Little route in which water goes. This is actually going down into the bile. Now, the bile is interesting because remember where that goes? Into the gallbladder? And this is a storage for the bile, and then that goes out and helps to break down your food. So there are certain toxins in the bile, right? It stands to reason, right? If there are toxins being taken away out of the blood and then being pushed down into these canaliculi, then they go down into the gallbladder, there are toxins in the bile, right? Where does the bile go? It goes to the gallbladder, and then what happens to it? It's secreted, right? Into that fatty food to break down the fat. And then there's something else that happens here. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but just think about it. There are toxins sitting right in the place where food is absorbed. What's going to happen? Possibly. Those toxins are going to get reabsorbed, aren't they? We need something there. Oh, there we go. Chris said fiber. Specifically, we need soluble fiber. Have you ever cooked oatmeal and it didn't look quite done, but you turn off the stove anyway, and you come back to it, what's it coated with? Like a slime on top, right? That's soluble fiber. Yeah, you could drink it. It's not going to be digested. Not going to be digested by the body because it's still fiber, but it's going to form a paste, and it's going to kind of adhere itself to toxins. Another thing that you can use, we're actually going to go in depth into this, is charcoal, activated charcoal. And we actually have a whole presentation today on activated charcoal, the benefits, and dealing specifically with liver health. Yes, question?
The bile is specifically breaks down fats.
Yes, fats. Mm-hmm. It's actually like it's kind of a salty fat type of substance. Actually, cholesterol, bile is 90% cholesterol. It's and 10% salt. So it's kind of a waxy, greenish type of substance that breaks down fat. Okay, let's see. There is a little, when the canaliculi run down here, and I'm sorry this is not really that good of a drawing, but when you have these little canaliculi running down here, these are running down into, eventually they'll get to a bile duct, that's right, and they get to a larger duct. God laid the plans, these plumbing plans, so masterfully. If you've ever been into a house and you've looked at like the plans they've had for plumbing, where they have to have like a big drain, then as it gets closer to the faucet, it gets smaller and smaller, right? But there are certain places that need big drains still, like toilets, right? Because larger particles are going to be going down there, not just water. This is a larger area here. When these bile ducts get closer to the storage organ, they enlarge as well. And then we eventually have them going to the gallbladder. So, and I'm sorry, it's not quite that big. None of my drawings are really to scale. So, this is the gallbladder. And there's a duct here going into the duodenum, and there's a little sphincter here. You ever heard of sphincter? Okay. Sphincter is a muscle. Your eye has a sphincter. Sphincter muscle. See what I can do? You can close it and constrict it. Your mouth is actually a sphincter. You can close it and constrict it. So you have sphincters all over your body. Some are hidden, like this little sphincter right here. Now, it's like a valve. Would you want bile to be pouring into your small intestine at all times? No, then your digestion would constantly be running. So you actually have this sphincter. It's sphincter of Oddi, O-D-I, kind of a funny name. The sphincter of Oddi keeps this bile in the gallbladder. And this is connected to the small intestine and the duodenum.
You said keeps the bile in the gallbladder?
Yeah. Okay, some more functions of the liver. The liver also processes proteins, and it makes proteins that are used in the body, such as even inflammatory proteins like C-reactive protein. Remember we studied that in our heart disease lecture. C-reactive protein, kind of an inflammatory protein. Fibrinogen is made by the liver, which is a clotting factor. And there are many other of these proteins that are produced by the liver. Remember, the liver processes and packages, basically, our nutrients. It also regulates temperature. The liver is probably the very hottest organ in the body at any given time, usually about 106 degrees. And so, as you can tell, this is a very, very hot organ. The reason why is because it's metabolizing so much. Do you know what metabolism is? It's building up and breaking down, is what it comes down to. We have something called anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is building up. So let's say the liver actually got some fat and started packaging it into a cholesterol, into a LDL. It's building up, right? It takes energy to build that up. Let's say if you wanted to build a building, you'd have to have energy, wouldn't you? You'd have to have either someone hammering, someone running a saw. That takes energy. It takes energy to build up. What about to destroy? You'd have to bring a bulldozer in, right? You have to have a wrecking crane to destroy this building. You need energy for both. When you put both of those together, there are anabolism and catabolism reactions going on all over our body. And in the liver, it's going on even more so than anywhere else. It's building up and breaking down. And so that's why the metabolism or the burning or use of energy is so high that the heat is very high there in the liver. So just think of it this way. When you have a high metabolism, there's a large amount of heat given off because energy produces heat. So the liver is a very hot organ because it's so busy. It's constantly doing something. There are also some very interesting cells here in the vessels here, the canaliculi vessels in between the hepatocyte cells here. And they are actually specialized cells. Remember we studied the white blood cells and we saw them on the slide? What do they go around and do? Eat things, right? Or look for things that shouldn't be there. Think about this. Where is this blood supply coming from? Digestive organs. There's some pretty nasty stuff that gets put in there sometimes, right? I mean, we might have bacteria in there, might have fungus, parasites, all kind of stuff we put in our mouth, and it gets past the stomach. So think about this. This blood can be very rich in bacteria or some kind of parasites. So God has placed these cells in our bodies that are known as Kupffer cells, K-U-P-F-F-E-R cells, F-F-E-R. And these eat foreign materials, old defective blood cells, and bacteria, specifically bacteria that comes from the digestive organs. So not only do we have the liver purifying, removing toxins, packaging for us, it also helps to rid the body of these germs. The liver is amazing, isn't it? And it's the biggest organ in the body. And God has given it the ability to reproduce itself so fast that we really have to really be in denial of God's lifestyle before our liver is really hurting. So God has given our liver a lot of resilience, and it's because we need it so much. Okay, here's another view of the liver, and as you can see here, we have the gallbladder kind of stuck down here. We have the good view of the ducts here, the hepatic artery, and the vein here. Now, I did tell you that this was very vascular, right? That there's a rich amount of blood in this organ, right? Why is that? Because every single cell has a contact with the blood. And so there's a lot of blood. It's like a sponge for blood when it comes out. If you squeeze the liver, blood will come out if you have a liver. It's because it's so rich in these areas, so rich in blood. So it's very vascular. Now, this portal vein actually comes from the intestines. This is called a portal system. It just refers to kind of transportation between one organ to another. And so this comes from the intestines over to the liver. That's the vein. And the bile duct drains down here. The common bile duct drains down into the intestines. So this is the common bile duct right here. Right there. Common bile duct. Okay, so let's go on here. Another function of the liver, as I said before, it packages. It can package triglycerides, so it can package fats into glucose. It can convert them. And it does this by helping to break apart the glycerol and the fatty acid, turning the glycerol into glucose. So if you're let's say you're fasting. So we have a student fasting here today. If in his body right now there's something going on, he had about 24 hours worth of glycogen stored in his liver. Now what is glycogen? It's stored glucose, right? So he's got that much of a reserve. But when his glycogen starts getting low, the body says, hey, we need to reserve this because we need to keep it for the brain. And so it says, okay, now we need to start using a little bit more fat. Let's start burning a little bit more fat for energy. We have some here. And so it sends out the messages, and the fats start being mobilized from the adipose or the fat tissue, goes into the bloodstream, reaches the liver. And at that point, the glycerol, remember the triglycerides? What's the triglyceride? That's right. Tri is what? 3. So tri is actually 3 fats right here. 3 fatty acids, that's right. So triglyceride, you have You have 3. See, red wouldn't be good either. Actually, you know what? Fat is orange. So we'll make it orange on the board also. So you have a fatty acid. And another fatty acid. So you have 3 fatty acids, and they are combined with a glycerol. That's a triglyceride. Okay? Triglyceride, when someone says triglycerides, now you know what a triglyceride is, right? It's just a glycerol molecule that links up to 3 fatty acids. Okay? This is very simple to remember. Triglyceride. And so what happens is this is kind of the storage. This is stored in the body as fat. It's stored in the tissue, in the fat cells. So when the fat cells release this, it can go over to the liver, right? There's another vein that actually goes over to the liver as well. And so this can actually be distributed right there. It's not going to go from the digestive organs over. It's going to go in this way, this other route. But it does get to the liver somehow. And in the liver it's broken down. Glycerol is actually broken down into glucose. And so glucose can be used in where? The brain. So when you're fasting, your body is going to be burning fat. Eventually it'll start burning fat after a given amount of time, and you'll have a large amount of these released into the bloodstream. Now, that's a good thing if you want to actually use glycerol for your brain's need for glucose. But then you have those 3 fatty acids, don't you? Just kind of floating around there. Well, the fatty acids are actually used in the liver. They can be produced or converted into storage containers, little sacks, if you will, called VLDL, which is LDL cholesterol. You've heard of LDL cholesterol, right? LDL is actually the harmful cholesterol. If you have large amounts of this, it's known as low-density lipoprotein. A good way of remembering this, we have HDL and LDL. And we have VLDL as well, but HDL is healthy. LDL is lousy. So H for healthy, L for lousy. Okay, what does the H stand for? Healthy. What does the L stand for? All right, so is LDL good for you? All right, it's needed in a certain amount, but if you have a lot of it, it's not good. It's lousy, isn't it? But if you have a high amount of HDL, what is that? Is that healthy or lousy? Healthy. All right, good. And this is the reason why. When you have these fatty acids that are released into the liver, a number of things can happen. But we're going to look at the processing here in the liver. It's processed. It's actually, these fatty acids are put into a container, which is the cholesterol container. Now, cholesterol is not fat in and of itself. If cholesterol were to be put out into the bloodstream, you would have a large problem if there was a lot of it, because it's kind of like a wax cholesterol. Our cells actually have cholesterol coating the parts of the cell. So if we were to look at a cell, any kind of animal cell here, we'd have cholesterols in its cell membrane, and quite a bit of cholesterol, because it actually helps to strengthen the cell membrane and also allow for certain things to be brought into the cell, allows the cell to eat. So this cholesterol sometimes is found just in circulation. If we take cholesterol in by mouth, if we eat cholesterol, it's going to come into the liver. And so if we eat animal cells, we're going to get their cholesterol from their cells. Our stomach is going to break this down, and we're going to absorb this cholesterol. So we'll have cholesterol floating in here. But we don't want that to go into the blood, do we? So what happens is the liver packages it up. It also can convert these fatty acids into a type of, put it into a cholesterol molecule as well. But it's very important that these are packaged correctly, because have you ever seen, if you were to like pour some oil into some water, what would happen? They wouldn't mix, would they? But these cholesterol, HDL or LDL, these packagings of cholesterol, or ways to package cholesterol, actually can float around in the water. They're more water soluble, so they can form like a mixture in the water. So it's kind of like putting the cholesterol into like a little mini submarine, and now this cholesterol can be moved around to where it needs to go. Now this is very important to know, because most people, in fact many in the medical profession, do not know this, what I just told you. All right. The fact that cholesterol does not, HDL, LDL, VLDL is not cholesterol. It's a packaging for cholesterol. It's a packaging. There's cholesterol inside of these, but they're not cholesterol. They're a packaging. Yeah, it's like a box. So HDL is a box, basically, or a submarine, if you want to put it that way. There are also other ways the liver packages fats. If it gets fats from the digestive system, these are processed, actually they come from the digestive organs as these big fat molecules known as chylomicrons. And these are very large, filled with fats and cholesterols. So there are a number of different packaging ways to package fats and cholesterol. But just remember that cholesterol, fat are not water soluble. So in order for them to go into the bloodstream, they need to have some kind of packaging. They can't just go straight in. If you have that in very large amounts, then it will be dangerous. You normally do have a little bit of fat floating in the form of the triglycerides.
When you have high cholesterol,
Uh-huh.
you have a whole lot of packages.
That's right, you do. And it just depends how many of the LDL do you have, how many of the HDL. Total cholesterol, if someone says, oh, you have a high total cholesterol, don't be worried unless you break it down. If you break it down and you see I have a large amount of HDL, that's what? That's good. But if you have a large amount of LDL, that's lousy. So you actually want a higher, you want to actually increase your HDL most times and decrease your LDL to a satisfactory level.
Is it more about ratio?
The ratio?
Is it more about the ratio?
Yeah, it's more about the ratio. Exactly. Exactly. But in general, though, you do want to prevent a certain amount of the LDL, though, as well. Ratio is important, but you don't want to have especially over 200 of the LDL cholesterol. The 200 being a measurement of that. Okay. So does anyone have any question on triglycerides? Where do the triglycerides come from? Fat, right? The fat tissue. Where do they go and what do they do? Well, they can be brought over to the liver, right? And what does the liver do to them? Breaks them down to glucose and can package these, right? Or can use them also. Can use them for certain things. Yes, question?
The fatty acids come from the digestive organs, right?
It can come from the digestive organs, but in this case, these fatty acids they're triglycerides. So these are coming from your fat cells. Okay? Any more questions?
The HDL stands for what?
HDL is high density lipoprotein. So it's actually a protein that encases these fats. Lipo is fat. Yes.
Our liver makes all the cholesterol that we need.
That's right.
That's why we don't have to worry about it. But what happens when it's making, especially this healthy vegan diet, what happens when you have it making the lousy cholesterol?
Then you probably need to cut down your intake of saturated fat. And actually there's another way of also removing cholesterol from the system as well. There needs to be a combination of two things. If you have genetically have a predisposition to high levels of cholesterol, you'll need to watch your intake of saturated fat and take measures to actually remove cholesterol in your intestines. What could do that? Soluble fiber. Exercise can help move things quicker. Charcoal, right? Acidophilus, I'm not sure if it breaks down fat, but it would help in a number of other processes in the digestion. Drinking plenty of water, flushing out the system that way. All these things would help. Also going out in the sun, because cholesterol, sterol, it sounds kind of like steroid, doesn't it? Sterol. Sterol is it's kind of a metabolite or something, an end process of a steroid. So basically, if you go out in the sun and the right kind of radiation hits the cholesterol that's floating around here, that's underneath the skin here, it actually converts it into vitamin D, which is a steroid, vitamin D. And so that's another way of getting rid of a little bit of extra cholesterol. Because if you have cholesterol that's converted into something else, it's not cholesterol anymore, right? Makes sense, right? So it's another way of reducing the total amount of cholesterol. Another thing you can do, plant sterols. Have you heard of these? Plant sterols. Most plants are very rich in these. They're kind of like almost like a steroid found in the membranes or the cell wall of the plants. These can actually compete with cholesterol. When cholesterol is secreted in the bile, remember it's 90% cholesterol, the bile, and 10% bile salts. That's right. And so what happens is your system can actually pull those cholesterols back in. It can reabsorb those cholesterols. But if there are plant sterols there, instead, they actually compete. It's like if we all tried to get in that door at the same time, what would happen? Only a few of us would get through, right? So if you have a lot of cholesterol and a lot of plant sterols all headed for the same door, there's going to be a limited amount of cholesterol that can get through because the plant sterols are also competing for that door. So this is another way to reduce your amount of cholesterol. Plant sterols, soluble fiber. Yes?
Metabolism. When a person has a high metabolism, is that because their liver is functioning at a higher rate? And the people say you must have a high metabolism because you can eat so much and you're still thin. Or is that something entirely different?
Yeah, that's exactly. You're right on the right track. Basically, your liver is not the only cell though involved in metabolism. If you put your hand on your arm, it's warm, isn't it? That heat comes from metabolism because there's energy being produced somewhere. If your hands are really cold, you have a slow metabolism. If your hands are always cold, you have a slow metabolism.
So how do we speed it up?
How do you speed it up? It just depends on the cause. There can be all sorts of causes for metabolism. The best way for the normal person to speed up their metabolism is exercise. Because think about it. Metabolism is what? Building up and breaking down. Right? When you're exercising your muscles, you know what happens? You break down your muscles too. And your body needs to go back through and build them up again, stronger. And so exercise is a great way to improve and increase your metabolism. So, yep. Okay, so I think we can move on here. This is just a diagram of these processing methods of fat. As you can see here, these are coming from the intestines here. And what comes out from the intestines in terms of fat? Well, these big chylomicrons. Now, choleo or chole refers to intestine. Colon, right? Colon is the segment of the large intestine. But chole refers to intestine. And so chylomicrons is a very large container of fat, basically, ready to be processed. And so this is taken into the liver and it's processed in here. When it comes out of the liver, here's another diagram here. Remember the bile? This cholesterol still goes over here. So see the circuit here? The cholesterol could just keep coming back. If you don't have enough plant sterols or you don't have enough fiber, what happens? Keeps going back. Do you ever get rid of it? It'd be difficult to at this rate, wouldn't it? Keeps going back into a circuit. It's like a racetrack. But what happens here, putting that aside, is when the liver actually secretes this cholesterol, into the bloodstream, it does so as VLDL. It packages it at VLDL, then that is converted into LDL, and that goes to the cells, brings that allows that to go into the cells and be used. So we do need a certain amount of LDL. If we had no LDL, we'd be in trouble because we wouldn't have any cholesterol for our cells. So the liver does this. Now the liver can produce cholesterol. Don't think that you have to take cholesterol into your system. Newborn babies are the only one that need to take cholesterol, and that's from mother's milk. Mother's milk is rich in cholesterol. So a newborn baby, their liver is not functioning enough to properly in the sphere of producing cholesterol. Humans can produce their own cholesterol. In fact, if you start eating cholesterol, your liver shuts down to a certain extent of producing cholesterol. So if you eat animal products, your liver is actually saying, okay, this is enough, we don't need to make any. We'll just kind of sit around and not do much in this line of work. But if you stop eating cholesterol, your liver says, hey, let's make the cholesterol ourselves. And so how does it do that? Processing fats. It's another way of getting rid of fat in your body. If you want to get rid of excess fat, go on a vegan diet. And your body will start doing a lot more things with the fat that comes in.
What about in the case where you don't have much fat?
When you don't have much fat? I have that case myself. You would need to just make sure you have a dietary supply. Nuts, avocados, coconut. Coconut is wonderful in terms of the fat content. Many of these fats are already ready to go in the bloodstream. In fact, the saturated fats in coconut are actually, they don't even really need to be packaged. They can go directly in because they're very short and they're ready to be used and utilized. So a lot of the animal fats are really long. They need to be packaged. They cause too much trouble. But the intestine will take in the shorter chain fats like some of the fats in the avocado or the coconut, these fruit fats. And so it's pretty amazing that what happens eventually is we have these HDL, which basically pick up this extra cholesterol that's given out by the cells. The HDL picks up the cholesterol. It's usually it's sent out empty-handed. It's like the liver sends out an empty box and says, when finished with cholesterol, please return here. And so it sends out this box and the cells say, here's some, there's some. Okay, HDL is now full, now it's going to go back to the liver. And what does the liver do with that cholesterol? Repackages it, right? So it repackages it and sends it back out as what? VLDL at first, then LDL. It converts itself on the route. So this is just another way of the liver packaging up and supplying the needs of the body. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Do you see why the liver is so important? It is so important, and it plays a great role in metabolic diseases as well. The ones that we've studied already: heart disease, cancer, diabetes. So, what are the top causes of liver failure? Liver failure, as I said, it takes a lot of liver damage to bring about liver failure. But there are causes of liver failure in the world today, particularly in the Western lifestyle. Western diet and Western lifestyle in general. Probably the number one cause of liver failure is toxin exposure. Now, drugs, alcohol are alcohol probably being the number one cause of liver failure and liver cirrhosis or scarring of the liver, known in the Western world. But drugs are a close second. In fact, what happens oftentimes is when we take prescription drugs or some type of drug and it goes into the bloodstream, the liver has to process it, doesn't it? Now the liver processes this drug, and sometimes when the liver breaks down the drug, it's like opening a can of worms inside the liver cell. It says, basically the cell, if I could put words in its mouth, would be saying, we don't know what we got ourselves into. It just took in an acetaminophen molecule. What's acetaminophen? Tylenol. and it broke it open, and all of a sudden acetaminophen turned into this nightmare inside the cell. And that nightmare killed the liver cell. In fact, acetaminophen is the number 2 cause of liver failure in the United States. Acetaminophen overdose. Sending, I think it's about 50,000 people every year to the emergency room. In fact, even in regular dosages, if you were to say, okay, what's the maximum dose? I'm going to take that. If you were to go to the hospital and you had a blood test before acetaminophen and then after acetaminophen, the doctor would say, what happened to your liver? Because they'd read the lab reports that said this amount of, and looking at the liver enzymes, and liver enzymes basically, when the liver cell explodes, liver enzymes come out. And the liver enzymes would be elevated so much so that they'd say, what happened to your liver? What happened to your liver? You say acetaminophen? Yes, that's it. That's what did it. But they still continue to give it.
Acetaminophen for what?
Tylenol.
Oh, just Tylenol? It's not the other?
It's Tylenol. You can also buy it as acetaminophen. There are a couple other names for it as well. Panadol, I believe, and some other. Motrin. Is Motrin acetaminophen? Can't remember. It might be ibuprofen.
Motrin is ibuprofen.
Yeah, it's ibuprofen. But a lot of these react in the same way, and not as deadly as acetaminophen towards the liver, but in other parts of the body. They react in a deadly way to the cells. It's very important for us to realize this, that these toxins that we're putting into our bodies, even in the form of pharmaceuticals, oftentimes are damaging our liver. The liver takes the brunt of the assault from toxins. Also, overuse of the digestive system, overeating. Remember, if you're exhausting an organ, it's probably going to decline in strength. If you were exhausted and you were sitting in class, barely keeping your eyes open, you'd be really worn down by the end of the class, right? And let's say I said, okay, we're finished with class, now we're going to have another class, 3 hours right after this class. And then after that, another 3 hours. And we're going to stay here until 3 a.m. in the morning. You'd be tired, wouldn't you? Now, this is what happens to the liver if it's constantly overworked, because it has to constantly package up things. It doesn't get a break. This is why when fasting comes into play, fasting is so nice for the liver because it allows it to kind of change gears a little bit and to slow down in certain processes. And of course, this is fasting in moderation. Okay, so we also have infection. Hepatitis is infection or inflammation of the liver. You can have a bacterial hepatitis. You can have a toxin-related hepatitis. Can toxins cause inflammation? They can. So you can have a chemical hepatitis, is what they call it. You can have viral hepatitis, where viruses attack the liver. Liver, it's over here. And you can also have bacterial hepatitis. Basically anything that attacks and inflames the liver, and it's a chronic disease, is hepatitis. Okay, so what can we do for our poor liver that's often overworked, underappreciated? Okay, fast is one of them. Now, I want to take you all back in time for a moment. Back to the days of Israel of old. Oftentimes when the Israelites realized they were doing something wrong, and they were repenting, and they were showing an outward appearance of repentance, what would they do? Number one, fast, right? Pray. And ashes. They would actually put ashes on their head. All right. I would like to introduce you to my most favorite natural remedy. This is nothing more than ashes. That has been activated. This is activated charcoal or activated ashes. We'll get into how these are activated in just a moment. I want to wrap up this talk on the liver before we move into this. Can you all see that the liver is very underappreciated? Do you have a new appreciation for your liver? Okay, amen. I do as well. Even since I first started in this discussion today, have a greater appreciation for my liver. So charcoal is something that can really, really help increase or to actually take the burden off the liver in terms of toxins. But it also can do so many other things in the body as well. It doesn't just help the liver, it helps everything. It helps everything. It's amazing. But let's look at some of these functions. But before we go there, I want to tell you what activated charcoal is not. I had a friend one time who put down his toast in the toaster about 10 times. He liked it burnt. And he said, well, you know, I get my activated charcoal this way. And I want to tell you that that's not activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is something else. Charred food actually consists of burned proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. And these can actually be cancerous if we eat a lot of burned things. They can adversely affect the health. Activated charcoal is actually made from wood or some kind of wood, maybe even like a coconut husk. You can make it from that as well. And this has been burnt. It's been turned into ashes. And then the oxygen supply has been cut off. What happens is the ashes are so hot, they're heated very high, that they continue the process of burning without oxygen, and so these little cracks start to appear in the carbon. And so this is how it's called activated charcoal. It's been activated because it's been kind of opened up. I have a picture of this to kind of describe how beneficial this is. If you just had one lump of charcoal, it could absorb or adsorb or adhere things to its exterior surface, right? If I covered my hand in glue, I could get a lot of dust on that hand, couldn't I? But let's say I opened my hand and I covered it in glue. I'd get even more, couldn't I? This is charcoal. This is activated charcoal. Activated charcoal has all these little nooks and crannies here so that the things that are adsorbed or adhered to the surface can actually go inside and be stuck as well. So there's so much more surface area. By surface area, I mean the amount of surface that you see here. Activated charcoal penetrate, the holes are in the, it's like almost like a sponge. So a sponge can attract a lot more inside of it, can't it? You get all kind of debris inside that sponge. Well, activated charcoal is kind of like a sponge. It's not just a magnet anymore, it's a magnetic sponge. This is a picture, microscopic picture here of activated charcoal. Do you see the little holes here and the fissures here? Now these are things that have been stuck to the outside of the charcoal. These are large molecules. But you can actually have smaller things get stuck in the inside here as well. It's amazing. The surface area of 1 cubic centimeter of activated charcoal is 1,000 square meters. To give you a better example of how this works, if you were to take 1 teaspoon of activated charcoal, and if you were to think about the amount of surface area that could have things stuck to it, if you had a football field of tape, of sticky side up tape, and you rolled it down the whole football field, you could sprinkle dust on that, it could get stuck, you know, it gets stuck to the tape. 1 teaspoonful of activated charcoal has the adsorption area of that whole area. Can you believe that? That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. We take this for granted. It's just burnt, it looks like burnt dust. But it's a miracle substance. Yes?
Well, I've seen charcoal. What's the difference between just charcoal and activated charcoal?
Charcoal is, it's just kind of like ashes that have not been activated. So the activation is what pushes these little holes. I'll go back a couple slides here. Let's say this, if I close this off and filled this all up with black, this would be charcoal. So things could only get stuck to its outside here. That's charcoal. Charcoal's still good. Things can get stuck to it, but activated is so much better because it has so much more surface area there to grab things.
So it's in the way that they process it then.
That's right. It's the way they process it, and it's you can make this at home. It's very easy. Yes?
Can we make it?
Yes, we'll make it.
Yay!
We will, and we'll get it on tape too. All right? It's very easy to do. Yeah, wear dark clothing. But in terms of this, another benefit of this is that if you're taking this internally and it goes down your digestive tract, sometimes things that are on the surface here can get bumped off and they can go back into the circulation. Or your body can get into a tug of war with it and say, no, I need this more than you, and pull the molecule off and absorb it into the intestine. But if it goes inside here, it's not really getting out anymore. It's going to get stuck somewhere on the inside. And so you'll have much more ability to take and hold on to toxins with activated charcoal as opposed to regular charcoal. I had a question somewhere. Okay. All right. I guess.
What about vitamins and other things? Can it distinguish between what is harmful and what is...
It has no way of knowing. It's indiscriminate. It adheres to anything that will allow it to cling to it. Have you heard of a carbon bond? If you study chemistry, carbon bonds are very strong. And so what this does is it just forms very strong bonds with things. But if the body needs it enough, it can pull off that vitamin or that mineral. It can pull it off. They've done studies to look at whether or not people develop nutrient deficiencies that are supplementing their diets with activated charcoal, and they've never found a nutrient deficiency. What activated charcoal will do, though, is it will take in medications. So if you're on a prescription medication that you're not ready to get off of, you don't want to take activated charcoal at the same time. Now, if there was an overdose of prescription medication, then of course, activated charcoal would be probably one of your first lines of defense against that. But just keep in mind that studies have shown to date no mineral or vitamin or mineral deficiencies from taking activated charcoal. And that they've looked at sheep, they've done autopsies on animals that they've supplemented, and they haven't determined any nutritional deficiencies.
Which relates to diabetes.
How does it relate to diabetes? Well, that's a good question. Relating charcoal to diabetes. Well, activated charcoal in general will help to eliminate toxins in the body. Diabetes in and of itself, you tend to have more toxins produced because the metabolism is not right, it's not quite right. The blood sugar is a little bit elevated. You have a little bit more free radicals in the body. You have more stress hormones. And so you'll have more toxins, more waste basically, coming out of the body with diabetes. And so what this will do is it'll help to take away some of that waste. And another thing is that it takes a burden off the liver, and we'll get to how that works in a few slides. The liver is very beneficial in preserving the liver health. Remember, the liver will actually help to produce a diabetic state if there's a lot of fatty acids being put into the liver, put into the bloodstream. So if the liver is in optimal health, it will have the energy and the means to be optimally fighting against that, to avoid exhaustion and that kind of thing as well. We're told in the testimonies, I believe it is, I know somewhere in the Spirit of Prophecy, actually Ministry of Healing it is, that what affects one organ affects them all. So if we're good to even one organ, we know that our whole body is benefiting as a result. And since diabetes is a metabolic disorder, if we're improving directly the main organ that's responsible for metabolism, it stands to reason that somewhere along the lines there's going to be a benefit in helping to reverse diabetes when you combine it with other things as well. But we'll look at some of these benefits. First, I want to go to the applications. How do we actually use this in the body? Well, we can take it internally. You can get it in powder. Actually, Country Life, our vegetarian store, Whole Food store, sells it in the canisters, and you can buy it in the canister. You can make it yourself, which we'll learn how to do at some point. You can also buy it that's been pressed down into capsules or tablets, so you can take that internally. You can also take a spoonful of the powder and make a slurry. What you do is I advise taking water first, then dumping in the spoonful of charcoal. Otherwise, if you put the charcoal in first, then put the water, you'll have a poof of this black dust, and that settles down. It can stain your clothes, or it can even stain like plastics like this. So you probably want to add the water first, then add the charcoal, stir it up. while that's still in suspension, what I mean by suspension is still floating there, you drink it. And if you don't like gritty, sandy type texture in your mouth, don't drink the very bottom of the activated charcoal. This is what actually causes a lot of people to vomit when they drink activated charcoal slurry, which is not necessarily a bad thing if the person is taking it for an overdose, and the poison control authorities have said help them to vomit, give them activated charcoal. Just give them activated charcoal and they'll vomit in most cases if they aren't used to taking it. But activated charcoal, when it's taken in a slurry, it doesn't really have a taste. In fact, it kind of takes the taste away from the water. If you have bad water, it's a way to actually make it taste and make it a little bit safer, is to make a slurry and drink it. How about externally? Externally, you can use charcoal. You can make it into a poultice. We'll learn how to do that in our natural remedies class. It's basically a wet charcoal compress. This is a picture of one right here. It's very simple to make. You can put one over the liver. This helps to draw out toxins through the skin. And you can actually make a liver compress which goes all the way around, wraps all the way around the liver, and helps to actually relieve some of the burden on the liver. This can also take out toxins. Let's say if you got stung by a bee. I was mowing my grass one time and a hornet or something stung me. And I had this horrible reaction to it. My whole arm started swelling up. And so I went inside and made a quick charcoal poultice, wrapped it around my arm like this. It went from about here to about here, and the sting was right here. And I took it off an hour later. My arm was swollen here. It was fine here. So I should have made it a little bit longer. But you see, the sting was here. And so the charcoal absorbed, it pulled all that toxin out. So it's very powerful in terms of if you're dealing with like a venomous sting, a wasp, a hornet, a spider, a snake. Taking charcoal internally and externally. I've heard of people having rattlesnake bites and treating themselves with activated charcoal. Anywhere you go, you really should have some activated charcoal with you. It's the first line of defense in many, many diseases and ailments. Okay, you can also make an eye wash. And the way you do this, you don't want to put the rough granules into your eye. Charcoal. It'll really cause irritation. You won't like it at all. You'll have to rinse it out. What you can do is you make a slurry, you set it down on a stable surface and leave it there for a few hours. What you'll see is that the suspension gradually goes down, it sinks to the bottom. And so you have this clear liquid and then this charcoal sitting at the bottom. The clear liquid is the charcoal that's actually bound to the water molecules. So it's actually, the term is solubility equilibrium. You know when you make salt water and you put a bunch of salt in the water, you stir it up, and then some of that salt settles down at the bottom? That salt is at solubility equilibrium, meaning the water has dissolved the substance and it's just going to sit there. It's in a nice state of equilibrium. So there's not a whole lot of it in there. It's mostly water. So when you're using this, it's mostly water that you're rinsing your eyes with. It's not a lot of charcoal. And it's not going to be irritating. It's actually very pleasant and soothing if you do it right. And you can use this for a variety of things. It helps to rinse out the eyes. Ellen White said in one statement dealing with charcoal, she said, charcoal is the only thing I'd ever put in the eyes because they're so delicate. And it's because charcoal is so natural, it's so simple. It's just carbon, pure and simple.
Sometimes when you mix the charcoal, there's a film.
That's right. I think that is some sort of contamination. Probably some residue that was left in the wood as it was burned. I have seen that with certain charcoal in particular. What I do is I just skim it off. But it's probably fine to take it as well because the charcoal is going to absorb it even if it's somewhat toxic. It'll absorb it. But in the case of that, I've seen that as well. I've had it with or without. Sometimes I get a little bit wary because I don't know what the person used to make the charcoal. You can actually make charcoal out of pallets. You know, the wood pallets, you see it like the factories. Some people do that. I would say the coconut husks are probably the nicest to make the activated charcoal with, but we don't have coconuts here, so I have to find something else. Yes?
Well, just something that you mentioned now made me think you can actually also make it out of animal bone and stuff. And the thing is, it really doesn't make any difference because once you burnt it, it's down to carbon.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Some of us may still choose to avoid the animal bones. Yes.
The other thing is, when you make a eye wash, if the charcoal is bound to the water, then how does the charcoal still affect the eye?
Because it still will have ability to adhere. The water molecules, it is bound, but it's not being bound, it's just kind of bound in a state of suspension. And so it's staying there, but it's not necessarily unable to bind with other things. And, water has two sides to water, a repulsive side and a attracting side. And so when other things come along in that water, and charcoal says, hey, I like you more. You're a little bit, I'm more stronger attracted to you. It'll break hold of the bond with the water and bond with something else. And so that goes in a study of chemistry. I don't remember many of those bonds, but there are bonds that are stronger than the carbon and the water bond. And so they would bond with that in that sense. So there are other ways for it to work. And I've tried it before and it's helped me. But it's worth...
Regular dosage would be like half a glass of water or 300 grams.
The only place that I can get like a real regular dosage is actually this study that was done in the Soviet Union that looked at men who were given 1 teaspoon of charcoal 3 times a day and had pretty much no adverse effects. That seems to be a pretty good dosage. 1 tablespoon 3 times a day. It's a pretty good dosage. It seems like a safe dosage based on the research.
How much water though? How much? Like a
I would take a large glass. If you don't take enough water, it can be constipating. So you want to make sure you drink plenty of water with it as well. Question, yes.
That 1 tablespoon, that was actually one of my questions. So do you take it on a daily basis? I mean, I've only used it for when I had a problem. So, but the people take it daily for
Yeah, because
medicinal
I have a
purposes?
friend who she gets a spoon, a regular soup spoon, and she eats it like 4 times a day.
Yeah, you can do that. You can.
Like every day.
You can do that. The study that I looked at, I think it looked at people over the period of like 1 or 2 months, and there were really no side effects at all. And it was dealing with cholesterol. We'll actually look at that study as well. But I've heard of people that do supplement with charcoal every day.
She eats that like candy.
Yeah.
It's mostly for pulling the toxins?
Yeah, for pulling the toxins out, for cleansing, for relieving some of the burden of the liver. If the liver has a burden lifted off of it, it's going to be jumping for joy, so to speak. It's going to be burning things, building up and breaking down things much better.
Does it matter if it's in a slurry or if it's in a capsule form?
In terms of, well, it depends on what you're taking it for. If you're taking it for like poisons, or if you have like upset stomach, if you ate something bad, if you're taking it for that purpose, you should take it as the slurry, because you want it to be thoroughly distributed throughout all your food. If you take it as a capsule, that's oftentimes, it'll stay in one place. It's just a capsulized form. Or if you take it as a tablet, it's pressed. Usually they put some kind of cellulose or something with it and press it into a tablet. So the slurry will actually, it's more like a liquid that you're taking, like liquid charcoal. It'll get to work its way in with just about everything in your stomach if you take it in time.
Because once it's in the bloodstream, it gets all over the blood.
So is the ratio of the slurry the same as, is that the tablespoon to 8 ounces of water, or is that?
I think 1 tablespoon is pretty safe for an adult to take. That's generally speaking, I only know what I do, and I take about a tablespoon and about probably about a 16-ounce glass of water, and that seems pretty nice for me. I haven't had any side effects from it. Now, if you were to take a tablespoon and like 2 ounces of water, that would definitely not be enough. And you could taste that as well. It would not be pleasant. It would be like kind of a gritty, slimy type mixture. My little girl actually will take activated charcoal from time to time, and she loves to take it. She knows it doesn't taste bad. It looks strange, but she likes to see her tongue turn black. And so if you have, little kids that you need to actually have take charcoal, tell them they get to see their tongue turn black, and it's really exciting. And you can do it first, and you can show them.
If you're fasting, you can also take it.
That's right. It's an excellent complement to fasting because it'll help to get rid of a lot of those toxins that your body is releasing as well. That's right.
Does charcoal help with cramps?
With cramps? I'm not really sure. It kind of probably would depend on what type of cramps they are. But if they're like congestive related cramps like menstrual cramps or cramp of that nature, it may be a benefit in terms of taking out some of the inflammatory compounds like prostaglandins. But you can also do some deep breathing to help with that. When you're deep breathing, you're actually getting rid of those prostaglandins as well. Deep breathing, also avoiding chilling of the extremities, and hydrotherapy. You can do a hot foot bath. You all will learn about that. Hot foot bath pulls away the internal congestion, pulls it down to the legs. And so all these things. The wonderful thing about God's remedies is that oftentimes no matter what you take, like garlic, charcoal, some select hydrotherapy treatments, they'll benefit the whole body. And sunshine. So it's really wonderful.
I have a relative who was on a ship cruise some time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that they offered a service
Mm-hmm.
where it would detox your body
Mm.
by your foot bottom. There was a pad
Oh. Mm-hmm.
put to the bottom of the foot,
Mm-hmm.
and it would actually change color
Mm-hmm.
while pull the toxin from your body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too sure what was in that pad.
I've heard of that. I've not checked into it though. Be worth checking out. But yeah, there are so many ways of detox, but by far there's one very simple way. Fasting charcoal. This is the way that the Israelites of old would show their repentance. They would bow down to the Lord, ask Him for help. Of course, detoxing is not going to be helpful without the Lord's help, right? He says, I am the Lord which healeth thee. And so He wants to cleanse us from all unrighteousness, even toxins in our bodies. And He's shown us the way. Yes?
What are the benefits of a charcoal bath?
Charcoal bath. I've never actually seen one done or taken part.
I've heard about that.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you could do it. I'm sure itching. Yeah, itching would be good. It'd basically be the fact that you would be taking away toxins from the skin. Yeah, similar to like applying clay to the skin, or applying a charcoal poultice to the skin, except you're going to cover the whole body with that. So could be beneficial, but make sure you don't stay in your bathtub. Yes.
What about European clay? Which one is better, charcoal or European clay?
I think they have a little bit different properties. Clay can attract a little bit different. It's more like an electrical charge type of attraction. It can pull out some metals, some heavy metals that charcoal can't, from what I've heard. But yeah, clay is another way of detoxing as well. Clay, charcoal.
Clay? First time I heard about that.
Mm-hmm.
So they sell that as well?
Yeah, they sell clay. You can buy clay. I don't use a lot of clay because it's so much easier to take charcoal. Clay, you have to stir it with a wooden spoon. Can't stir it with a metal spoon, I heard. I don't know. My wife and I did that for a while, but we switched back to charcoal. But clay is probably beneficial as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on a little bit here. This has been a nice talk we've had about detoxing. It's wonderful. Okay, I want to go through some of the specific effects, though, of activated charcoal. One thing that it does is that it binds to toxins. And charcoal doesn't absorb. It doesn't absorb things. Meaning it doesn't, like the white blood cells, it doesn't go and pick this up and eat it up and take it inside. What happens with charcoal is it goes and it gets stuck on charcoal. It adsorbs. So you have adsorption. AD, not AB. Okay. You know what I'm talking about, right? Adsorption. Okay. So it binds to toxins to prevent stomach and intestinal absorption. So think about this. What happens to the toxins if they are absorbed into the intestines? What happens to them? Where do they go? To the liver. And what do they go into these little liver cells? And if they're toxic enough, they cause the demise of these liver cells. We don't want that to happen, do we? If we can prevent it. So charcoal can actually take it and adhere to it and grab it and actually keep it from going into and damaging the liver. So it can take off some of the burden of the liver, the toxin burden. It's an antidote for the ingestion of numerous poisons and toxins. However, it doesn't bind to all toxins. So if you have a poison control center, if you have a small child in your home, you'll want to know the poison control center number, because if they take some kind of chemical, call that number, they'll look it up on the computer instantly and say, do this, give this, give this, give this. Have activated charcoal, have some other things on hand that you might need. But activated charcoal doesn't bind to all toxins, but it does bind to most. So it's definitely something to keep on hand, even if you don't take it on a long-term basis. It also helps to clean bile. Remember that circuit that we saw where the bile goes from the gallbladder into the small intestine, and then it goes into the small intestine and it gets absorbed, right? Goes back into the bloodstream, back into the liver, gets put back into the bile, goes back again into the bloodstream, goes into the liver, goes into the bile. It's a racetrack, isn't it? What if you could actually catch things while they're in the small intestine and take them out? Catch these things. Well, activated charcoal can do that, because what it does is it interrupts this recirculation process. This is known as the enterohepatic circulation right here. And so what happens is sometimes certain drugs especially get to overdose levels if they're taken chronically, because they recirculate in the bile. Why? Because they're toxins, and the liver says, hey, toxins, we're going to put you out into the bile because we want to get rid of you. If the person is eating a nutritious diet, Genesis 1:29, right? Fruits, grains, nuts. This is going to be pushed out of the body by the fiber. But if the person is eating the Western diet, this is just going to go back into the recirculation. And so they're going to have toxins recirculating in their bodies. This is why the vegan diet is so good for detoxing, because it helps to interrupt this cycle. And so we can have all kind of toxins being taken out of our body, even that are already in the body through this charcoal, and also soluble fiber as well. Can do the same thing. It also purifies the blood. It allows certain drugs and toxins to actually be drawn out of the blood and bind to the charcoal in the intestine. Now remember what we saw here, and I'll show you. We saw here that there were certain little hair-like projections on these villi, which are little protrusions in the lining of the intestine. What happens is food is absorbed through here, right? But when charcoal is coating these things, blood is coming through here, and certain toxins and chemicals can actually be pulled out almost like a magnet, pulling these chemicals and toxins out, and so that they can be eliminated through the intestines. Do you see how that works? Does everyone see how that works?
It's like sucking dust out of the carpet.
It's like sucking dust out of the carpet, exactly. except the charcoal is the vacuum cleaner. And the dust is the toxins. So it's a wonderful substance. It really is wonderful. Just to give you an idea of the circulation, this is a great example here. The circulation going on, going to the liver here. This is the aorta from the heart, goes over to the spleen, then this goes over to the what? Liver, right? You also have the hepatic artery that goes straight to the liver. This supplies the red blood. What's the red blood? Oxygenated blood. The liver needs oxygen too. So it has to get it from somewhere. There's another artery here, the mesenteric artery, that goes to the intestine. And by the time the blood comes back from the intestines, it needs oxygen. Why? It dropped it off for these cells here. So it's blue. So it goes over here, it carries the food over here. The stomach also. It all goes over to the liver. So any blood that comes from the intestines is going to go over to the liver for processing. So this is the processing plant, remember. And it does have its own blood supply that supplies oxygen-rich blood as well. So there are a number of ways in which the liver gets the blood, but just remember it does get oxygen-rich blood directly from the heart, and it does get oxygen-poor blood from the intestines. However, there's still enough oxygen for it to get get oxygen to its cells. In fact, it actually gets most of its oxygen from this blood here because there's so much of it still coming. There's still a little bit of oxygen in that blood. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll come back and finish this section up.